Opportunity is everything for running backs in fantasy football. And this data right here shows you last year the people who got the most touches and the most touches on a per game basis for those people who missed some time during the season. And then how many points they were scoring per touch. This is going to measure the efficiency rates of running backs and also how much opportunity they're getting. And maybe just help us identify players who maybe are too inefficient and not getting enough opportunity to be drafted at their price. And also maybe help us find some really good values later if you don't want to go running back up top, who you could draft and still get some really good things here. So I'll let you start this off about what we're taking away from the data here that we found.
Yeah, so I want to focus really here on the fantasy points per touch overall, because you're kind of looking at three big tiers here where you've got the top, which is obviously the most efficient, right? The players that are getting, however much opportunity that they're getting, but for every single touch, they're scoring way more fantasy points than everyone else. That could be based off of touchdowns. That could be receiving upside. That could be yards after the catch, yards per carry, whatever. You're seeing your list right here of Achane, of course, right at the top. Mostert right there with them. CMC, Gibbs, Kyren Williams, and Breece Hall. And then you've got this big kind of middle area of a bunch of running backs that I would consider pretty safe this year in 2024, where they're less than 1 point per, or less than 1 fantasy point per touch. They're just right at that sustainable sort of area, which is, they're kind of getting what you expect with every single opportunity that they're getting as a running back. And then you've got all the guys that underachieved last year with, despite volume, despite touchdowns, despite wherever they ended up landing in total points last year, ranked among running backs, they just were below average, well below average compared to everyone else. Saquon being a really notable one up here, and Rachaad White as well. Even though Rachaad White finished as the running back 4 last year, he was incredibly inefficient per touch with the amount of opportunity that he was getting in Tampa Bay. So that's an interesting one to look there as well. But with the touches per game, I kind of want you to touch on the touches per game specifically, because I think there's a lot of notable takeaways here.
So the main thing that I'm noticing here, a lot of the running back ones, so Kyren Williams, who was a running back 1 last year, Christian McCaffrey, right? Rachaad White, Alvin Kamara, Travis Etienne, and then moving down the list here, Derrick Henry, Breece Hall. All of those guys had above 16 touches per game. And so we definitely have our threshold here. But the elite guys, and the elite guys really being last year, Kyren and Christian McCaffrey on a per game basis were the 2 best running backs. Those guys are well into the 2021 range. Okay. And so you can look at this in like 3 different really there's 6 different categories here. There's the guys that get the volume, but they're extremely inefficient. The guys who get the volume who are efficient or efficient enough. So of those 2 categories, Kyren Williams, Christian McCaffrey were 2 guys last year that not only got 21 touches per game, they were extremely efficient on those touches from a fantasy points perspective. Meaning what? One of those guys is the 101. The other one got more touches per game than Christian McCaffrey and still scored almost a full point per touch and is going in the 2nd, 3rd round. Okay? So there you go. First takeaway from this video is at least Kyren Williams.
Kyren Williams is a pretty good value.
It's pretty good value. It's not like the situation is exactly the same, but again, I think a lot of people are overestimating Blake Corum. And then you've got the guys here, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Rachaad White, all guys that got the touches per game to be elite, but they weren't near efficient enough to do it. And so since Josh Jacobs only played in 13 games, he was not a running back 1 last year, right? Saquon only played in 14 games. He was not a running back 1. Now, Rachaad White played all 17 games, was as inefficient as Saquon was, and was a running back 1. In fact, he was a running back 4, and a lot of that was just availability, right? On the flip side of that, you look down here at the bottom tier, and you have guys here that didn't get enough touches per game and were inefficient and therefore didn't really do much last year, like Ramondre. Bijan played a whole season, so he managed, but he still didn't he only got 16 touches per game and was, middle of the road efficient. But then you've got the guys down here that were extremely efficient on very little volume. Raheem Mostert being the first one. Raheem Mostert, 1.09 fantasy points per touch last year. That was good for first among these running backs and first in the league. He was really, really freaking efficient last year from a fantasy perspective. Mm-hmm. Raheem Mostert now, and I get that we're going to project Devon Achane to move into the lead role in that offense. There's absolutely no way that Raheem Mostert is going to be a non-factor in that offense. In fact, Mike McDaniels has come out and said that backfield is led by Raheem Mostert, and you've ignored it, And we've pretty much ignored it because we don't want to get crapped on. Here's the reality of it, guys. And if I'm being 100% honest with you, I think Raheem Mostert could be the lead back there again this year. And yes, Raheem Mostert has only had one good season. It was last year. He's 30. I get it. I know about Raheem Mostert. I get it. I know. He's in the same offense. He's in the same situation. He has the same head coach, the same offensive scheme, the same quarterback. He's playing with the same running back room and the same receivers. He's playing on the same team in the exact same situation. And he was the running back, 2 last year? And we think he's going to be, I mean, like, what's a logical guess of regression for Raheem Mostert? Like, yeah, what if he becomes a running back 2? Where's he being drafted at right now? He's being drafted in the 12th round of fantasy drafts. I mean, the dude is an absolute smash at price. He is an upside play for free, essentially. Mm-hmm. And Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy who got the same amount of touches per game, was also very efficient, slightly less efficient, but and is also in a committee, first of all, and is going in the first round, actually, which, again, Jahmyr Gibbs, high floor guy because of his efficiency. However, I don't think you're going to see a serious uptick in the touches per game. I think he maybe gets up to 16, 17, which would put him in that middle range. I don't know if you see as much efficiency from Jahmyr Gibbs this year. So I'm not saying I have a problem with Jahmyr Gibbs' price. It's just interesting that these two guys are so similar in the fact that they both got limited touches. They both were very, very efficient. They both go back to the exact same situations. And one is being heralded as the running back 4, and the other one's the running back 25.
Yeah, and here's probably the biggest, most immediate takeaway I had from this data when we were working on it. Like, when you were looking at all of the running backs that from a per game perspective had less than 17 touches per game last year, where are they going in ADP? DeAndre Swift, pretty low. Walker, pretty low. Cook, decently low compared to guys like Gibbs and Achane. Yep. Ramondre. Bijan's probably the only outlier there where he's going really, really high in the middle of the first round. Bijan and Gibbs. And then you've got Jones and Mostert, and then Achane going middle to the end of the second round. So it's really Bijan, Gibbs, and Achane. Yep. Of those three, one of them is able to have a bell cow workload on the ground, not just getting a ton of receiving opportunity, and he can do both things. There's not really anyone else competing with carries outside of, Algier, and they're not going to give Algier a million carries like Arthur Smith did in 2023 if they have a brain. So that really leaves us with Jahmyr Gibbs and Devon Achane, the two premier receiving backs in the NFL. What I think is interesting here is, number one, when you are drafting Achane in the middle of the second round, you are understandably taking an upside shot on what he was able to do from an efficiency perspective last year. But clearly, when you look at the total points in the top 12 producing running backs in 2023, there is a common denominator among all of them, and that is touches per game. It's volume. We talk about this all the time with running backs, but volume above all, especially when you're talking about like half PPR or even standard formats in your fantasy football drafts, like the receiving guys like Gibbs and Achane, especially Achane, you are cutting your opportunity in half. You're cutting your floor in half. If you're not in a best ball format and you own Devon Achane, you've got to be at least a little bit nervous. At least a little bit. And this kind of is, I don't want to be a downer on Achane and Gibbs the entire time because, again, I'm totally admitting the upside that they could have in their respective offenses, but I think it could be a little more capped than people expect because you are betting on them being outliers, not just in fantasy points per touch, because a lot of people can be efficient in fantasy points per touch. You just saw it with Mostert, right? You just saw it with Breece Hall. You just saw it with Kyren and CMC, some of those premier guys up there. But again, all of those other guys had more touches and more opportunities per game. And to me, I cannot justify this. This is me putting my life on the line out there in fantasy, and you can crap them. I cannot justify taking Devon Achane in the second round as my second most valuable fantasy asset in 2024 when I can go get Kyren Williams with twice the amount of touches per game.
Not to mention Kyren Williams being efficient at a level. Devon Achane's not getting 1.36 fantasy points per touch this year. And when you sort this data by fantasy points per touch, Devon Achane is obviously at the top, but Kyren Williams is in that top tier with him. 0.92, right. That's really good. That's 90th percentile efficiency.
But that literally shows you that Kyren Williams, as a runner of the football, as a full, well-rounded running back, is more proven than Devon Achane.
Easily.
Because he is able to be efficient with a bell cow workload.
Now, I mean,
and Achane and Gibbs have not done that.
Well, I mean, Kyren got hurt last year. He only played 12 games.
That's true.
So, I mean, you could make the argument that Kyren Williams...
But Achane only played 11 games with even more limited opportunity.
That's true. And so injuries are a problem, and we can't predict injury. But they're both going at the same price. Right. Kyren last year at this efficiency and touches per game level is what you want Achane to be. It's like absolute... In fact... Achane's not getting to 21 touches a game this year, I don't think. I don't think there's any way. The efficiency level, obviously, he could be as efficient as Kyren was last year easily because of how good he is. It's just the fact that he is in an offense with the second most efficient person, which also proves to you something. These guys, Mostert and Achane, are to some extent a product of their environment. Mike McDaniel has cultivated the perfect environment for running backs there to be not only extremely efficient, but extremely fantasy productive. And I think that continues to this year, but I don't necessarily think it means that only one of those guys is going to. We are playing extreme best case scenario because with Achane, let's say he goes up to 16 touches per game. That is a huge jump. That's 4.2 touches. So when you're saying okay,
Achane had 11 touchdowns with his opportunity.
That is a 36% increase in volume. 36%. That's pretty high, right? And so, okay, so let's say he gets up to 16 touches per game. Let's say he plays 15 games. That's probably best case scenario for Achane is 15 games playing most of the season. And then let's put him at Kyren levels of efficiency, which is the median of the high tier. That puts him at 220 fantasy points. When you're sorting this list by overall fantasy points last year, that would put him as a
high-end running back 2, low-end running back 1.
Low-end running back 1. I would say his ceiling, though. Let's say theoretically you're like, yeah, he's going to be more efficient than that. Let's say that he plays 16 games, or no, let's say he plays 15 games next year, right, at 16 touches per game, okay? And then let's put him at that level of efficiency. Let's put him at 1.04, and that's 250. And that's putting him running back 5-ish. He's being drafted as like the running back 7. You are drafting him at his absolute best case scenario ceiling. You're projecting a 40% increase in workload to maintain an elite level of efficiency, and you're also projecting there is so much that has to happen for this to come to fruition. You have to check the boxes. This has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen, and then he'll be a good value. The odds that Devon Achane returns on his ADP, in my opinion, are extremely low because of the number of circumstances and the number of things that have to occur for him to actually perform at the level 2 return on his ADP.
Yes. I completely agree. And I do want to pivot over to some other guys here because I think there are a lot of high upside shots that you can take on other players in this draft that aren't as expensive as Devon Achane in 2024. I mean, the number one guy that I'm looking at down here is Ramondre Stevenson, who had 16.2 touches per game, which again is on the lower end, but with injury and playing through injury for a lot of the season, was able to get that opportunity in the worst offense in the NFL, second worst offense in the NFL, and is now going to be in a rejuvenated situation on the New England Patriots where he's really the only guy back there. You can say Antonio Gibson's going to take away from him. Like, whatever. We know what Antonio Gibson is at this point. He's not really going to take much away. I think that's a pretty good shot to take in that range. You're also talking about all these guys, again, that didn't produce as top 12 running backs, but were very, very efficient when they were on the field. They either struggle with injury or they just, some sort of scenario called for them to not be a top 12 running back. You've got Kenneth Walker. You've got Isaiah Pacheco, who actually, again, he's kind of being drafted accordingly. But the difference between a guy like Pacheco and someone like Achane or Gibbs is Pacheco actually has a really safe floor, right? He's the only running back that's getting opportunity there. He's not like hyper productive in the receiving game, but he was, mid-level efficient with mid-level touches and just across the board was very consistent. He's going to get his own every single game. You're probably not going to lose your leg, or you're probably not going to lose your league if you draft Isaiah Pacheco.
Well, you lose your leg either, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Him, yeah.
Josh Jacobs is probably one of the other bigger outliers here as well, and his current price going in the 3rd round in fantasy most of the time. He had 21 touches per game last year and was by far, it was not close, the least efficient running back on a fantasy points per touch basis, like the least efficient relevant running back.
And he was top 5 in opportunity too.
Right.
He's still and look, part of that was, but here's the thing though.
Here's a question for you.
This is the kicker for me, because the double standard here is wild.
Yeah.
Because you have Josh Jacobs, who
is the least efficient with the most opportunity, going pretty close to the guy who's the most efficient with the least opportunity.
Not only that, but look, everybody wants to talk about how inefficient Rachaad White was last year on just as much volume. White, you got Rachaad White down here, just one touch less per game, more efficient than Josh Jacobs. And everybody fades Rachaad White because Rachaad White was inefficient last year. And yeah, people are going to say, well, Josh Jacobs went to the Packers, it's a completely different situation. True, better offensive situation. However, you really are going to tell me that there is that big of a difference between Josh Jacobs, who has shown to be inefficient when he doesn't score a high number of touchdowns, and Rachaad White, who had 64 receptions last year, to Josh Jacobs' 37. I mean, that tells you not only he has a higher floor, but I think the double standard there is crazy. People want us to talk about the inefficiency of Rachaad White, and the reality of everybody in that backfield in Tampa Bay was inefficient last year. And you can say the same thing about Vegas, but the fact of the matter is Josh Jacobs came off of a year where he was leading the NFL in touches. And last year on a touches per game basis, he was third among all of these running backs. I mean, Josh Jacobs would have to crank up his efficiency, because even in the year where he was the running back 1, running back 2, right? That really good year he had 2 years ago, his efficiency wasn't off the charts. It was the volume paired with decent efficiency and being fully healthy that got him to that point. And well, that's what it is a lot of times for these players, is it's staying healthy, and it's getting the volume. And then the efficiency, rarely do you get that much volume and you absolutely suck and you don't score any fantasy points.
Yeah.
And even the guys up here who got the touches per game, Jacobs, Saquon, and White, all of them, White was a running back 1. Saquon was good, really good last year as well. And Josh Jacobs wasn't very good, but he only played 13 games. And had he played a whole season, he would project to be a low-end running back 1 still, because opportunity, it rules everything.
Opportunity is huge. And I think Kamara, it's interesting to see Kamara up here and his touches per game, him being in the green, one of the higher opportunities per game running back in this range in 2023, because Kamara is the poster child, right, for a receiving upside running back who's like your modern style running back that doesn't get a lot of carries but gets a lot of receiving work. Look at his total touches per game. It is top of the line, top notch, elite level, 20 touches per game. Okay, this isn't a guy that's getting 7-8 targets and 5 carries in a game. He is getting a bell cow workload between his receiving and his rushing work. Yeah, it's split between the two, but we've got to see Gibbs and Achane get that. We got to see Achane get 80% of what Kamara is getting for us to even consider Kamara or consider him in the same conversation as Kamara. And he's not even close. He's dang near half that.
And look, draft any of these guys at your own will.
Yes.
Do it, because we could be wrong. It's not like we're not wrong about things. We are wrong about things.
Correct.
We are numbers driven. We're not numbers dictated. We're numbers influenced. And so these numbers that are influencing our opinions, at least about fantasy football, are telling us, these guys scare us.
There's some screaming outliers here, and the 3 of them are right at the bottom there. It's Mostert, Gibbs, and Achane. One of them, they're being priced accordingly because of that risk. The other 2 are still going super duper high. So
exactly. So again, draft who you want. It was worth bringing this to your attention. But do us a huge favor. If you play fantasy football, drop a like on this video. Make sure you subscribe. We appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later.